Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on my channel. I am Hannah. I have lost the plot, or have I? This video is going to be a check-in on how my reading's going this year and an invitation to you to share how yours is going. It's going to be broadly in three parts. We're going to do some stats about like what I've actually been reading, and then I'm going to reflect on some reading intentions that I set at the start of the year when I was feeling hopeful, and then we are going to do the mid-year freakout hashtag, which I cannot remember who started it, but I got the questions from Lauren over at Lauren and the Books. I will link her channel down below. So, 2023. So far, this year, I have read 65 books this year, so far. I am recording this not quite at the end of June, kind of 2/3 the way through June. So yeah, 65 books, which like, numbers aren't really what kind of do it for me in terms of reading, because I've had some years where I've read loads and loads of books and not really enjoyed many of them, and then other years where I've not read so much but have enjoyed them more. On the whole, I think I've enjoyed my reading more this year than I did last year, which is nice, and we'll talk about in the next section. But yeah, 65 so far. I am gonna take my data mostly from my Storygraph account. So first up on their stats is moods. So my top moods this year have been reflective, emotional, dark, and challenging, which sounds basically right. That sounds like me. That's what I read. They were my top genres last year. I think they will forever be my top genres unless I have a massive change of direction and taste. So I'm not at all surprised by that. In terms of length of book that I've been reading this year, I'm pretty evenly split between short books under 300 pages and long books between medium books between 300 and 500, and less than 10% of my reading has been big books. Again, that kind of sounds about right. I like a chunky book every so often, but it's definitely not what I gravitate towards, because I'm like a bit catnippy about what I like to read, and because I like to read multiple books at a time, sometimes I find a big book really like sort of gets in the way of my like rhythm. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. I have read some long books this year though, and there are some that I've liked and there are some that I haven't. 28% of my reading has been non-fiction this year. I'm surprised by that. I expected it to be lower, because last year I definitely know that I read more non-fiction than this year, and partly, and I'm jumping ahead slightly, but one of my reading intentions was to read a bit more by whim and a bit less by like things I think I should read. And I think a lot of my non-fiction reading in the past has been kind of like books that like I've felt like I should read. So I've done that less this year. So I was expecting there to be fewer books. So I'm actually surprised that over a quarter of my reading has been non-fiction, like pleasantly surprised. There's also not really any surprises in my top genres. So of the 65 books that I've read this year, 26 of them have been literary. I don't think there is a single genre that is ever going to topple literary, partly I think because it's one of those genres that like it goes hand in hand with so many other things, like contemporary literary historical, literary queer. Yeah, like it's a broad one. I think it's probably a lot of people's top genre. Second is LGBTQIA+ literature. Again, that's not surprising. I mean, I'm part of a queer book club. I have surrounded by lots of queer people who read lots of queer books, it's unsurprising that that is going to be quite high on my list of genres. Historical is in third place this year. That has moved up from last year, and that has been slightly consciously done because I realised last year that a lot of the books that I really enjoyed were historical novels, and I hadn't really thought of myself as someone that really liked historical novels. So yeah, I've been seeking them out more this year, and on the whole, I've been having a very good time with them. And then fourth is contemporary with 12. Did I give you the numbers for the others? I don't think I did. So 26 for literary, I definitely said that. 20 of the books I've read this year have been LGBTQIA+ books, then 13 historical and 12 contemporary. I'm not going to go all the way down all the list of genres. I mean, I'll pop it up here and you can pause and zoom if you really care, but there they are. Format, 57% of the books that I have read this year have been hard copy, like print books. 34% have been on audio. I always have an audiobook on the go. So that is not very surprising. And 10% of my reading has been digital, which is relatively new for me. I don't have like a proper e-reader. I've just got like a tablet, so I don't like to read tons on there, but I have been reading more ebooks than I have read previously, and that has been like a nice way, because sometimes it's just like handier, like if I'm going away for work or whatever, it's easier to just like take my tablet than take a stack of 6 books. I mean, I'll always take at least a couple of physical books, because, you know, like, what if something happened to my tablet and then I'd have no books? Then I'd have to buy more books. So those are the stats. If stats are your flavour, there they were. So at the start of this year, I filmed a video, which I will link down below if you are particularly interested in hearing the whole spiel, but I'm going to be condensing it here for you and giving you an update, so don't feel like you have to. In general, my theme for this year was that I thought I was going to read less but read better. A bit like what I was saying earlier around trying to get out of this sort of sense of obligation that I should read certain books because they're canonical or well thought of, or just because everyone else on social media is reading them and I've got FOMO. Like trying to fight that and really think carefully about like, okay, why do I actually want to read that book? Is it just because other people are talking about it? Is it because I'm worried like about what it will say about me that I've not read that like classic book or whatever? Or do I want to read it because it genuinely sounds like I'm going to like reading it? And I know that sounds like an obvious thing, but I actually think I'm not alone in not always thinking about whether I genuinely really want to read something and just going, oh, like loads of my friends have read this book and they really like it, so therefore I must read it too, you know? And on the whole, I think I'm doing okay at that. I read 62 books by this time last year, so I am actually reading more than last year. But I do think I'm reading better. There's definitely been fewer instances, particularly with classics, kind of modern classics. I read loads of them last year that I just knew weren't really going to be for me, and read them anyway because I felt like I should. So I'm better at doing stuff like that. I do still have to control myself. There is a particular genre, right, that I want to like it because so many of my friends like it, and I just don't like it. And I make myself read it, and I have to stop, and it's YA fantasy. I'm not a big fantasy reader. I'm kind of partial to a fantasy book every so often, but I have realised I definitely like either like a cozy middle grade fantasy a la Diana Wynne Jones, or vastly prefer like an adult fantasy book. YA, there's something about YA that it doesn't resonate for me. No shade on you if you like it, I'm thrilled for you, but like in general, anything YA doesn't really work for me. I keep trying with the fantasy because some of the worlds sound really cool. It's also where you often get really good representation, not always, but often. And so sometimes if I just want to be able to like read a book that's got really good queer rep, or like just generally really good diversity, often that's YA books, or at least the ones that feel more readily available and accessible are YA books. So I think that's why that's the one that in the second half of this year I gotta stop. So if you see me on social media at all talking about potentially reading another YA fantasy book, please make me stop. So that in general is going pretty well. I also think I'm having a much more consistent reading year, just in terms of like life and finding time for myself to read. So this is the amount that I read last year on a graph, thanks Storygraph. And it was really, as you can see, quite up and down, which is fine, normal, life happens, you know, sometimes we're busier and we don't have as much time to read. Whereas this year, excluding May, which was a terrible reading month, much better, more like consistency, which is nice. And I think it reflects the fact that I'm feeling much more settled as a reader. I also think a little bit like having this channel now has sort of made me find the time to read when otherwise I might not have, which has been really nice. Not in a like, oh my god, I have to read because like I have to read, but in a like, yeah, like actually like I kind of want to film another video, so I gotta read some books. So yeah, that's been good. One of the intentions that I set this year was that I wanted to use my local library more. You'll be thrilled to know I've joined both my local libraries. So I live, if you're new here, I live in Newcastle. I've joined Newcastle City Library, and my local library is a North Tyneside library that's literally like 3 minutes away from my house. I haven't yet taken any physical books out of either of those libraries, and that is because I am mostly trying to tackle my unread books here. But what I have been doing is using BorrowBox to read audiobooks and ebooks from the library. So when I said before that I was reading digital formats a little bit more, that is thanks to the library. And I've been enjoying that, especially because it's allowed me, as I've said in my original reading intentions video, it's allowed me to kind of take some chances a bit more, you know, like get a book that I'm only like 30 or 40% sure I might like, because like no harm, no foul, right? Because, you know, it's not like I've spent any money on the books, and if I don't like them, that's fine, just return them to the library. I do want to start getting some physical copies out. I am slightly reluctant though, just partly because I'm such a wrecker of books. I wish I was the sort of person who is able to keep their books nice and like tidy, but I spill things on them and I like to annotate, and so I don't know how much I would enjoy the experience of reading a physical library book, but I am very much enjoying getting the audiobooks and getting the ebooks out. I also quite like, because I normally, most of my digital and audio content previously I'd got through Script, which is kind of like unlimited, and there's so much on there and you can kind of listen to it whenever you want, that it's almost, I get a little bit of like decision paralysis sometimes about like what to read, like what audiobook to download or what ebook to start. And I quite like that when you're using something like BorrowBox, or I know like other libraries use Libby, the books come through when they come through. So, you know, and you only get them for 2 weeks. So in some ways it it takes some of the decision making out for me, which I quite like. The third thing I said I wanted to do this year was read more local authors, and that is something that I have been really consciously doing. Now, have I been better at purchasing more local authors than actually reading them? Yes. So I said in that video that I wanted to read a book a month by a local author. We're in the middle of May. No, we're not. We're in the middle of June right now. And I have read 5 of the books I've read this year have been by Northeast authors. So I'm not far off, but I've actually, I keep all my Northeast authors on like a separate little display on my piano. I'll insert a little picture if you want. And so I've definitely started building up like a nice little library. I haven't got to as many of them as I would like to get to, but I'm really pleased with how that's going. So I think that's a tick. Now, I also said at the start of the year that I wanted to prioritize reading the books that I already owned and like maybe stop buying so many books. I have been doing that. On the whole, however, at the start of the year, I had 3 shelves of unread books, and now I have 3.5 shelves of unread books. So like I've read 65 books, and at least 30 of those were titles that I physically owned. So I have read about a shelf, but I've also added a shelf. We're not going to think about that too much. These weren't like promises. These were just intentions. And what I will say is that I have stopped just going to the charity shop and like buying whatever book because I like vaguely have heard of it before. I have stopped doing that. And a lot of the books that I've got have been like gifted to me by like pals or whatever who've just like read a book and been like, oh, I think you'd like this. And then it just goes on my shelf until I can get to it. And I also had my birthday recently and I got loads of books for my birthday. So we're not going to feel too bad about it in the end. Yeah. I also said I was going to do some of the Storygraph reading challenges this year. I won't go into tons of detail on these, but I definitely wanted to do the Storygraph Read the World challenge, where there's 10 countries every year and you read a book set in or by an author from each of those countries. I have done 4 of those so far. I have vlogged them all. So I've done Argentina, South Africa, Norway, and Trinidad and Tobago. I'll link those vlogs down below if you are interested. So I'm a little bit behind with that, but that's okay. That's all right. And then I'm 60% of the way through the genre challenge. I care less about this one because there are just some genres on there that I'm like not that asked about. And if I don't finish that one, that's okay. But what I'm not doing is specifically picking books to meet those prompts. I'm just like, if I happen to read a book that meets one of the criteria, then great. But if I don't, then also fine. I'm also, I hadn't said this at the start, but I'm also doing, there's a We Didn't Start the Fire reading challenge on Storygraph, which like is the Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fire. And they have a prompt for kind of each of the things. I think from the first couple of verses, it's not the entire song, I don't think. But there's like 200 odd prompts on there. So I have been working my way through that. I'm actually like 65% of the way through that. And I'm currently in the middle of filming a vlog where I'm trying to tick off 15 more of those prompts. So that will be, it won't be up by the time you're watching this, if you're watching this the week that this video goes up, but it will probably be in the coming weeks. So keep your eyes peeled for that, if that sounds fun. I was also going to take part in a couple of year-long read-alongs. one is going very well, War and Peace, which is a reread for me. I really like War and Peace. I'm reading a chapter a day. I'm mostly listening to it on audio. It's going good. I'm enjoying the experience of slow reading that and kind of delving deeper into it. And Simon over at Footnotes and Tangents on Instagram, who runs it, is like brilliant. He's like a very, very good host. The Les Miserables one that I was gonna do didn't happen. I did finish reading Les Mis, but the chapter a day thing I realised didn't work for me if it's a book that I haven't read before, because it was too slow and I was getting too frustrated about how long it was taking. So 50-50. Then finally, two last things that I said I was going to do. I wanted to read a book in Spanish this year. I am average at Spanish, maybe even below average at Spanish. And I did want to read a book. And then I work with a colleague who's from Tenerife, and she gave me a couple of recommendations because I wanted like middle grade Spanish books, right? But ideally I wanted to read something that was a Spanish book, like by a Spanish author and had originally been written in Spanish, rather than, you know, like a middle grade book that had been written in English and just translated into Spanish. And I ordered one from a specialist like foreign language bookshop, and they cancelled my order, and I've just remembered that I never followed up to see what happened to it, but the book never arrived. I'm pretty sure I got my money back, but yeah, that's still a maybe. I think if that happens, it will happen much later in the year, because I've been using Duolingo along with half the rest of the world, and I've not been doing so hot on Duolingo this year. I'm definitely like stagnated in my progress because I've got to the point where I'm finding it genuinely really difficult, and all my motivation has like plummeted. But you know, maybe if I buy myself a nice Spanish book, I will then feel the need. My friend has a copy of Northern Lights in Spanish, but I feel like that's a bit intense for my first book in Spanish. But hey, I also said I was going to try, in the style of Lizzie Stewart, drawing the covers of every book that I've read this year. I did January and I think most of February, and then I got really behind and it stopped being fun. And it started being a thing that I had to do, so I stopped doing it because I'm not in the business of forcing myself to do things that I don't want to do, not when it's all like low stakes. Like, you know, I told some people on the internet that I was going to do something and I've decided not to do it. Like, that's fine. I might instead focus maybe just on drawing some of my favourite books of the year, almost as like an end of year exercise, but I am not promising anything. So those were the intentions, and I've been talking for too long. So we're gonna do the mid-year freakout hashtag now. So this is 13 questions about your reading so far. But first, I need to have a drink. Right. Okay. So first up, I've got a stack of books here. Is your favourite book of 2023? I really struggle. I really struggle with favourites when they imply that it should be singular. But this is a book that I read in January and has just stayed with me. And it is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I think part of what I love so much about this book is how much I have enjoyed the people in my life also then reading this and really enjoying it, and like lots of my favourite people love this book, and I think it's always really nice when you can kind of like share that with people. So this is probably my favourite book that I have read so far this year. The best sequel I have read this year. Now, I don't read a lot of series, so I think I've only read 2 sequels this year. But it would be this anyway, even had I read more than that. And it's Winter by Ali Smith. So this is the second book that came out in her seasonal quartet cycle. I adored this book. I kind of wanted to put it in the previous question, but I knew I would be including it here, which is the reason that I didn't. But really it kind of is tied with, I'm going to move them over here because of the shadow. It really is tied with Our Wives Under the Sea, really. Ali Smith is my favourite author. I love everything that she does. And this was very, very good. I did also read Spring this year, which I didn't like as much. But I vlogged reading both of those, so links will be down below if you want to hear more about these. The next question is new releases that you haven't read yet but want to. So I have this thing that I call racing the paperback, where you know when you buy a hardback book and then you realise, shit, the paperback's going to be coming out soon and I still haven't read it in hardback. I have a few books that I'm in the danger zone with. And a few of some of them I'm so excited about and I don't know why I haven't read them yet, but I particularly don't enjoy this experience of like the paperback then coming out, because I think I've said before on my channel, I don't really enjoy reading hardback books. I find them cumbersome and annoying and I can't crack the spines on them and they're hard to read with one hand, which means like often like if I'm reading in the evening on the sofa, I'm also like throwing the ball for the dog. So like I need a hand free. And you can't often do that with a hardback book. So if I buy a hardback book, I had better read it. So here are 4 titles very quickly that I'm hoping to read soon before the paperback versions come out. This is The World and All That It Holds by Alexander Hemon. This is a queer historical novel that is set during the outbreak of World War I. Then have The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I went to to a talk that Maggie did for the launch of this book and I still haven't read it. This is another historical novel set in Italy. Then we have Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. This is one that I've heard so many people rave about and I'm desperate to read it. And again, it's like, why have I not read it yet? Why have I not read it yet? But never mind. And this is a non-fiction title. Non-fiction? Oh, I hate that. Non-fiction title. This is All the Beauty in the World by Patrick Bringley. And Patrick worked as a security guard in the Museum of Modern Art. Was it the Museum of Modern Art or the Met? The Met. And this is his sort of memoir reflecting on his time watching people looking at art. It probably won't surprise you, for someone whose favourite author is Ali Smith, that I really like the interplay of like art in written works. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to that one. Number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I am not brilliant at like keeping an eye on the horizon for what is coming, but there is one book that I'm very excited about reading, which is Eliza Clark's second novel, which is coming out in a few weeks actually, which is Penance. I really loved her first book, Boy Parts, which I read in another reading vlog linked down below. Yeah, I'll leave that there. I'm really looking forward to reading it. I actually have a digital copy on my e-reader at the moment that I've got through NetGalley, so like I'm excited to read it and I currently have access to it. Why haven't I read it yet? Never mind. Biggest disappointment of the year. Am I okay? I'm really like struggling to say all of my syllables. Right. The first book was The Deloriad by Missouri Williams. I read this in the same vlog that I read the Eliza Clark book, so linked down below for why I didn't particularly like this one, but I thought it could be really, really interesting, and it just wasn't. It wasn't for me. And the other one is Les Miserables. I didn't like this. The bits I liked of it were the plot as recognised from the musical, and I could have just watched the fucking musical. Dead. I'm sorry, I am very aware that it makes me a heathen, but not for me. Biggest surprise. Okay, so I said earlier, I don't really like YA. Last month I read Infamous by Lex Croucher, which is a YA rom-com, romance, another thing that I don't read a lot of. And I had a bloody lovely time with this, which just goes to say that I don't think any of us can straight up say that there's any genre that we won't be able to find a book in that genre that we like, even if we don't like the genre as a whole. Because romance and YA, not something I normally read. But this, had a great time with it. Favourite new author to me? I mean, I've read lots of books by authors that I've not read before this year that I really, really like. I don't know if I can call them all like new favourites, because in most cases, in fact, all cases, I've only read one title by each of these authors, but they do all stand out as people that I read where I'm like, oh, I've got to go read other things that they've written. So Julie Ramfield and Eliza Clark I have already mentioned in this video. Yeah, both their books, I think, potential new favourite authors. Jessica Andrews also was one of my Northeast authors that I've read this year. I really liked her book Saltwater. Kevin Jarrett Hussein, I've just filmed a vlog reading his book for the Trinidad and Tobago prompt, Hungry Ghosts. I thought that was really, really interesting. And I'm very interested to read more by him. I've literally just finished reading Henry Hoke's debut novel, Open Throat, which is a ride and will be coming up in a vlog soon. And I also very recently listened to On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, who is an author that I've been meaning to read for ages, suspecting that he might be one of my favourite authors, and I really, really liked that too. So there are some potential new favourites. But like I said, none of those, I've not read more than one book by any of those, so I don't know yet. Newest fictional crush, I mean, I don't really get fictional crushes, but there is this character from Cosmonites. That's all I'm gonna say. Newest favourite character, I thought this would be really easy, but I think because I read so many books with like questionable protagonists or like, you know, flawed people, that like it's quite hard. I couldn't immediately think of one, and then I realised I did start listening to the Frida Klein series by Nikki French on the recommendation of many people, but particularly Jen Campbell, who always raves about Nikki French in general and the Frida Klein series in particular. Frida Klein is a psychiatrist, therapist. I can't remember specifically what she is. Therapist? Maybe a therapist. But she ends up working alongside the police in this kind of crime series. And she's very cool. She's a very cool woman, and I liked her a lot. So we'll say her. Number 10 is a book that made you cry. So I've got a couple. First is a non-fiction, and this is Many Different Kinds of Love by Michael Rosen. This is Michael reflecting on when he was very, very ill with COVID in hospital and his recovery. And it is like a love letter to the NHS, but it's also like deeply personal. And the grief in this for like on all levels is just, but it's also kind of hopeful and wonderful. And yeah, I cried several times. And the other one, this is a book that it wasn't making me cry all the way through, and I didn't even think it was going to be a book that made me cry. But then at the end, it just kind of like hit me like a sledgehammer, and I wasn't expecting it. And that was, I listened to the audiobook of All Among the Barley by Melissa Harrison. And like, this book made me profoundly sad at the end of it. So yeah. Hungry Ghosts by Kevin Jarrett Hussein actually also made me cry. A book that made you happy. I could think of fewer books that made me happy than ones that made me cry, which tells you everything you need to know about my reading. But I did have a lovely time listening to The House of Many Ways by Diana Wynne-Jones this year. I'd never read her Howl's Moving Castle series before. I started it last year. This is the third one. I don't know if it's the last one actually, but I just, it's like wholesome and cozy and like a kind of warm hug of an audiobook. And Kristen Atherton narrates them, and she does a really, really good job. Then, penultimate question. The most beautiful book I've bought or received this year. I have two. So I've been coveting Alison by Lizzie Stewart for quite a while now. I absolutely adore Lizzie Stewart's art style, and I've just been like wanting to get to this graphic novel for a very long time. And then my partner and it's interesting for a graphic novel because it has some kind of like prose sections, and I just think it looks delicious. So I'm really looking forward to reading that very soon. But yeah, my partner got me that for my birthday, so yay. And then the other one is a non-fiction book, and it is The Golden Mole by Catherine Rundell. And I just think, like, literally it's just a very beautiful book. I mean, it's got gold spreadsheets, but it's laid out just beautifully. And there's these, like, let me see if I can find you one, really gorgeous like illustrations. And it's been sitting up on my non-fiction shelf, and it needs a more prominent place really, because it is like absolutely stunning. I haven't read this yet either, but yeah, that is very, very beautiful. And then finally, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I don't do so well with compulsory, as you might have gathered, but because I am really enjoying War and Peace read along, I would like to finish rereading it. We're this far through so far, and I'm really enjoying it. Loved it the first time round. I'm loving it again. I want to finish. The other couple of bits, I really don't want another year to go by without having read a Persephone book. So this is number 129. It's The Call by Edith Ayrton Zangwill. Persephone, if you're not familiar with them, are an independent publishers now based in Bath, and they publish sort of forgotten classics, often, not exclusively, but often written by women. And they produce them in these gorgeous kind of dove grey editions, and every book has its own specifically chosen end paper design with matching bookmark. And I love what they stand for as a publisher, and I also loved the sound of this book when I picked it up, and I want to read it because I've told myself I'm not allowed to buy any more Persephone books until I read one of the ones that I've already got. So got to do that. And the other final thing, other than continuing some of those reading challenges, I have been vlogging my reading experience of Ali Smith's seasonal quartet. And I have these two to read. So summer, I will be reading in the summer, probably in August, and then I plan on reading companion piece in autumn of this year, and then I will have completed that set. So, all in all, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like it's been a nice year. If you have a booktube channel and you're doing the mid-year freakout, please leave a link to your video in the comments down below, because I'd love to watch. I'm nosy. If you don't have a channel but you want to answer the questions anyway, I will have copied and pasted them in the description for this video, so you can pop your answers in a comment, because it would be really nice to just hear how your reading's going, either through those questions or just, you know, in your own words, tell me how your reading year is going. I hope it's been good. And yeah, this has been fun. I did this tag really belatedly as my very first video on my YouTube channel. I did it in like October or something. But yeah, so it's been nice to revisit some of those questions. I've had a lovely time on this channel so far. Thank you so much, those of you who are here and supporting. No, that's far too sincere. Have a nice day, and I'll see you later. Bye.